Last week, if you were with us, we started this brand new series, Perennial. What does that mean, though? We talked about this phrase, the perennial philosophy. Now, if you're out there and you're thinking about your spiritual journey, and we've been reflecting on that all morning, all the ways that we might, have shown up in our lives, the religions that we were handed, the spiritual paths that we chose for ourselves. And as you've gone through that journey, have you ever had the sense that perhaps the diverse religions of our world, the different spiritual paths, they're all kind of pointing to some deeper truth about what it means to be human? Have you found that to be true on some level, right? That through, obviously there's many things that we find to be harmful about organized religion, but if you look at the heart of what so many of these teachings are, that they all seem to be kind of in their own way, in their own language, in their own culture, in their own time, seeming to express something about life, about reality, about spirituality that is somewhat unified, right, despite their differences. You found this at all to be true? No one? Okay. All right, I'm going to go down the street to the other group that I think might have more resonance with what I'm talking about. All right, thank you, guys. Well, if there's anyone out there that feels this way, I'm talking to you, okay? That intangible yet so... the thing that we sense, that there is some kind of connective tissue between these different traditions. This is what we would call the perennial philosophy. This is a word that you might associate with plants, perennial, right? Like a perennial plant. And the connection here is that a perennial plant is a plant that doesn't just bloom once, but it blooms again and again and again. It is ever renewing, ever blooming. And in the same way, the perennial truths about humanity and of spirituality and about what it means to be alive, that they ever renew themselves. They might show up in a different language, in a different culture, with different metaphors, but the deeper truth always finds a way through. So to say that something is perennial is to recognize that across the various spiritual traditions, and even through science, that there is something being pointed to about reality. There's something being revealed about reality. And maybe the most important question that we will ask during this series is, how do we actually live that and embody it versus just simply talk about it? So today we're going to go on a journey, and we're going to talk about this journey that you've probably already been on. And to do that, I want to share the title of today's message. It's a title that I've had with me for a while. I came up with this before the series. So in many ways, this is sort of like the seed from which the rest of the series germinated from. And this title is Dogma to Dharma. Now, thank you. Someone said, cool, awesome. That was the reaction I was looking for. Right on. Now, I figured, the cool thing about, thank you for thinking it's cool. One thing I think is cool about it is that if we ever did a sequel, it'd be really easy. Just Dogma to Dharma. Thank you. But then I was thinking, if we're going to do a sequel, we could envision a trilogy, Dogma to Dharma 3, Revenge of the Dogma. But that kind of seems like a scary place to leave things, right? We need to resolve it with a fourth, Dogma to Dharma 4, Dharmageddon. Let's stay in the present. As Michael said, let's just stay in the present moment today. We'll come back to Dogma to Dharma. Now, the reason that I love this title is because it's really just about a journey and a movement that we take. Maybe from starting off in a place in life, we were handed a lot of religious baggage, a lot of ways to see the world, and really told that this was how we needed to believe in order to belong. And perhaps that journey has taken us into a place where we can trust our own knowing, our own individual path, that which sustains and supports our spiritual journey. Both of these words are fancy words. They're religious-y words. And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to explain, at least define these words in the way that I intend to use them today. So you don't need to feel lost if you haven't encountered these words before. And these are words that take on a lot of different meaning. They're ancient words, and so you may have heard them in all kinds of contexts. I will explain what I'm talking about when I use these words today. But before we get there, I do want to just speak on the core of what I think this message is really about, and that's belonging, what it means to belong. See, how many of us realize that belonging is of utmost importance in our lives as human beings? It has everything to do with how we think of ourselves, how we see ourselves and our own identities. It has everything to do with how we relate to one another. And often, even without realizing it, it drives our behavior. We do things, whether conscious or unconsciously, in order to belong. In fact, Abraham Maslow, who created Maslow's hierarchy, he saw belonging as a very, very essential need in the hierarchy of needs. If you're not familiar with the hierarchy of needs, it basically says that at each level of our needs being met, we can move into a different, more abstract level. So once our most basic survival and security needs are met, like once we know we are going to survive for another day, the very next level of needs is belonging, right? So basically, right after literal survival, we want to belong. We need to belong. So how this looks practically is this. Like, if you have taken care of the things that are absolutely essential, right? You have food, you have shelter, you have a bidet, right? The three most essential aspects of human life. Right after that is belonging. One of those was not real, but right after that in the hierarchy of needs is belonging. What that tells us is that belonging isn't just something that we desire. And in the same way, loneliness isn't just something that we would rather not experience, right? Loneliness is our need not being met. So we see how crucial belonging is. And for many of us, whether we realized it or not at the time, we did things and we believed things and we agreed to things in order to belong, right? When it comes to our communities and our families, so much of this happened before we were even old enough to recognize exactly the dynamic that we were being put in. But essentially, we agreed to certain ideas, right? We bought into a certain way that things are done in order to experience belonging. And in general, these ideas, these, standards, they're unquestionable, right? There are things that we just couldn't question, we couldn't have doubts about, right? And so this is what we're talking about when we use the word dogma, the things that are unquestionable that we agree to in order to belong, right? And so many of us have heard this term in a religious context around the beliefs, the dogma and doctrine, the things that we are required to believe in order to be a part of a community and gain all the benefits of belonging. And for many of us, especially in a religious context, we were given this dogma when all we knew was that we wanted to belong on a subconscious level, right? We weren't at even a point where we could think critically about what we were being told to believe, right? We didn't consciously make this trade, right? And so in many ways, dogma is something that we have inherited and grown up with. And the reality is, I don't think dogma is exclusive to religion. I think we see dogma all over the place in our world. You can have dogma about all kinds of things. Anything, really, that you don't allow yourself or anyone else to question. Like, how many of you can be honest that you're pretty dogmatic about your college sports loyalty, right? Like, especially those of you out here, I see you, like Michigan fan, but some people, there are some Wildcat fans out here where if someone in your family was like, I don't think I'm a Wildcat fan anymore, you would have a family meeting, right? You're like, we need to fix this somehow, There are things that actually happen in the life of our family, in all seriousness, that we do need to buy into. Like, sometimes there are events that have happened. Anyone have an event that happened in your family that there's really only one way that people are allowed to talk about it or people are allowed to see this thing, right? And if you have a different view, if you saw things differently, if you feel differently about something or a certain person, that isn't allowed in the life of the family. That too is dogma. Sometimes there's dogma in the workplace, right? Like, you ever show up to a new job and they're like, hey, this is how we do this thing here. There's no other way. Like, this is where we keep the pens, right? Like, that tells you how long it's been since I've had a real job. That's my example. But fill in your own example, right? Like this is how we do things here. And you're like, there's got to be a better way. I can think of 5 better ways right now. Why do you still do things that way? And they're saying, we do it this way because this is how it's always been done, right? We're all dogmatic about things, right? I'm dogmatic about some of the things that I like. Like I would consider myself pretty dogmatic that sushi is the greatest food ever created. And if you're out there and you disagree with that, I'll still acknowledge you in the lobby. Like I'll still give you like a head nod, but I don't think we'll ever fully understand each other. You know what I mean? So no, I'm just kidding. But the reality is that we all have dogma, religious or not, that we've bought into, right? I think this is actually why we have such intense political polarization today. Because in many ways, when it comes to the two sides, right, this binary, this dualistic way of seeing things, right, that you must fully buy into the dogma of one side or fully buy into the dogma of another. And again, we as humans, we desire belonging. We want to feel safe and part of a tribe. And so I understand why people in their anxiety, in their fear, just fully agree to one or the other side. But the reality is this has compressed our capacity for nuance, right? And this is what it does in all areas of our life. Have you ever come across this phrase and even felt like it was a wall when people said, this is how we do it around here. This is how it's always been done. I think in many ways, this is why society and humanity is quite stuck, and we're in quite a difficult moment, because there are so many things that we have been doing as a species that are not working. But we are so afraid to move out of what has always been done, right? And to break away from the dogma of what it means to be human. And so this has shown up, it shows up in politics, it shows up in ecology, this shows up in every field you can think of. And certainly it does show up in religion and spirituality, right? This thing that we turn to, this field of life and exploration that we turn to in many ways to experience the greatest of what life has to offer, right? We turn to religion or spirituality for belonging. We turn to religion or spirituality for freedom, for connection, for hope, for peace. And yet the problem is that we come with these really authentic desires. And yet others or institutions or people in power, they twist those desires. They say, well, you want that? This is how you're going to get it, right? They try to make it so simple and so black and white, and we lose the capacity to find our own way through. I was realizing that there's something going on in our world today where it's like we just want the quick, easy steps to get to where we want to go. And it seems like every book that comes out today is like how to be happy, how to find peace. I was in Barnes & Noble recently, which, by the way, I hadn't been to a bookstore in a long time. Like, it's great. Don't sleep on books. Don't let bookstores go the way of, what's something that we don't have anymore. Anyway, the travel agents, okay? Don't let bookstores go the way of travel agents. Like, keep going to support your local bookstore or Barnes & Noble. I don't know where I'm going with this. But the point is, I was in Barnes & Noble the other day, and I was having a great time. But I was realizing that, gosh, there's a lot of book titles that have kind of the same exact thing going on. And so I realized, there's a pretty simple formula to making a bestseller. And I thought we could even figure out a bestseller here today. So someone pick a number between yell out a number between 1 and 20. 7. Okay, someone yell out something that you think people want to experience in their life. All right, here we go. Easy one. New bestseller from Aldea. We all write it together, okay? So we all share the profits, right? New bestseller, 7 Keys to Peace. All right? Right? That sounds legit, right? That sounds like something that you would see, right? This impulse towards finding that sense of wholeness. This is the religious impulse. In fact, the word religion, broken down to its most basic root, means to reconnect to the whole, to return to wholeness. So we're looking for this sense of unity and connection, and yet we're often told, I have the exact way that you're gonna find that, right? Like, there's this philosopher I love. His name is Peter Rollins. He's a religious philosopher, and he's from Ireland. And so he grew up in Belfast, Ireland. He moved to Los Angeles, and when he moved to Los Angeles, he started saying, in a lot of his talks, he started saying that LA is the most religious place that I have ever lived. And he's like, I know what you're thinking, right? Coming from Ireland, a place that had a war over religion, right? But he's like, LA is the most religious place that I've ever lived because everywhere you go, someone's trying to sell you something that's going to get you to heaven, that's going to get you to God, right? Like you buy this, take this drug or go on this diet or buy this car or follow this guru. Every corner has someone trying to sell you something that's going to get you to wholeness. But here's the problem with this kind of dogma, anywhere we encounter it. Really, all it is something that someone else decided upon for you. That's the etymology. That's the ancient Greek of dogma, in fact. All it means, in its most basic root, is that which is agreed or decided upon, right? And so maybe you're like me. Maybe you grew up in evangelical Christianity, and you were told that the Bible is the one and only true document and word of God, and there's no questioning it. And then, if you're like me, you found out after some time, like, wait a second, this book was compiled and edited and interpreted and reinterpreted by a bunch of human beings, and not just human beings, by a bunch of men, and not just a bunch of men who were living hundreds of years after the time and place in which the original text was even written, and all these people are deciding for everyone else what is the truth and what others are supposed to believe. How many of us had some beliefs decided for you when you were young, right? And you simply had to nod along. I'll let you know some of the ones that were decided for me. Right? I was told that the only way to see the creation of the world was that it was made in a literal 7 days, which raised a lot of questions about dinosaur bones. Anyone who grew up, in the kind of tradition that I grew up, you know about the dinosaur bones, right? Anyone? Fake news, right? Noah's Ark, had to believe in a literal Noah's Ark, which, again, so many scientific biology questions that are confusing and cannot be answered, right? And then maybe the most actually psychological, damaging dogma that I needed to believe this exactly as it was explained, but it was explained very confusing to me, and it's this. It's that God, is super mad at all of his children, right? Why is he mad at all of his children? Because they broke the rules that he made. But it's his rules, so he's mad. They broke his rules. Okay, so he has to kill them all, right? And he's like, well, I'm sorry, I made these rules. I don't know, my hands are tied, right? I made the rules, but I have to do it. And he's like, wait a second, I have another idea. I have another son, and this is actually like more my son, even though they're all my children, but this one's like really my son. He's actually so much my son, he's also me. He is me. So I'm going to kill me in order to prevent my wrath from all the other ones. And so I have to do that. And you're like, but that's you. You're going to do that. You're going to do that to you. He's like, well, it's me, but it's not me. But it is me. But then I'm doing it. And then you're just like, well, why is all this happening? Because I needed it to. But it's like, you're the creator of everything. You needed it. Okay, anyway, you get it. I need some kind of graph and chart to make it all make sense, with the yarn. If anyone has that yarn laying around, help me out. But the point being that if you are handed a way of understanding reality, a way of seeing the world that you are not allowed to question, that you are not allowed to challenge, that you are not allowed to offer some critique to, you might be encountering some dogma. And it's likely that in many of these situations we are being asked to give up our willingness to challenge or critique or to question in order to get this belonging and safety and group approval. And along the way, we let go of our individuality and our own unique perspective and the allowance and space for doubt. And friends, doubt can be so powerful in leading us to that which is most authentic for ourselves. Here's the problem, though. The problem is that when it comes to dogma, it actually stands against everything that spirituality actually is. Because spirituality is really the most personal and intimate aspect of our lives and of our being. I personally believe that all of us are so unique in the way we see the world that the divine, that the sacred is going to show up to all of us in our own uniquenesses. It's going to meet us where we are at. So the idea of regulating and controlling one's spiritual experience and one's spiritual impulse at this point just seems ridiculous. And thankfully, Ram Dass, who I respect quite a bit, he thought so too. He said, the spiritual journey is individual, highly personal. It can't be organized or regulated. It isn't true that everyone should follow one path. Listen to your own truth. Friends, may we be wary of those who tell us they have the one and only truth, and that we must deny our own along the way. If you ever feel that here, right? If that's ever something that you even just sense on some level in something that's being said here, I encourage you to question it. I encourage you to find what's authentic for you. Because the move here is to move towards trusting ourselves and our own truth. And this move towards self-trust, I think, meets us at a very crucial time in our world, because I think in many ways we are living in a time in our history in which I have never seen so much mistrust and lost trust towards authority and towards leaders, right? Like I certainly must, it's true for me in my lifetime, but I don't know if you feel like this is just true in general. Have we ever seen a time where there is most mistrust, right? And a loss of faith, an erosion of that sense that we can trust people in leadership, that we can trust institutions, that we can trust authority. And so it's an opportunity for us to move toward what Carl Jung called individuation, this spiritual and psychological journey toward finding our own path, becoming who we truly are as individuals, not defined exclusively by outside authority and the collective. And this is not just an exclusively spiritual journey. This is really just a life journey, though I think all of life is spiritual. But if you want to, categorize, like, this doesn't have to be just relegated to our spiritual practices. I think for a lot of us, we may have come from narratives that were handed to us in our family, narratives that were given to us by society. How many of us had to reject some of the narratives that we were handed in order to become more fully ourselves? We had to go our own way, and going our own way means rejecting what we've been given. And so, friends, this is the move from dogma to Dharma. Last month, we had a series called Doing My Part, and we explored Dharma through the lens of how we can help others, how we can serve others, how we can be a beneficial presence in the world and the collective. And we said that Dharma was essentially, it was your medicine, it was your gift. It's the unique way that you experience the world and your perspective on the world and how that translates into your spiritual path, into the ways that you serve, into your own sense of what is right and loving in the world. And so we recognize that Dharma is uniquely and highly individual. And I'll again share another quote from the Bhagavad Gita. I shared this when we talked about Dharma last month. One of the oldest Hindu scriptures, and it really just explains the importance of authenticity when it comes to Dharma. Better is one's own Dharma, though imperfectly performed, than the Dharma of another well performed. Really just an ancient way of restating that great bumper sticker, be you, because everyone else is taken, right? See, dogma is uniform. It's the same for everyone. Sameness is the highest virtue in dogma, but with Dharma, it is uniquely yours. And you must ask yourself, what is life-giving for you? What brings more light into your life uniquely for you? And this actually fits perfectly with the most ancient Sanskrit root of this word, which essentially just means that which supports or that which sustains. So your Dharma is that which supports you on your path toward unfolding and being the person that you know you can be in this world. Your Dharma is that which sustains you, that which works for you on your path, increasing in love, increasing in compassion. Your Dharma is that which is perennial in your life, which means that there are no two Dharma that are going to be exactly the same. This journey from dogma to dharma is a journey from this dogmatic sense where we trade our belief for belonging, we trade our authenticity for a sense, at least, of security, and it's a move toward the dharma of trusting our own soul. And though we might feel as though we're giving up belonging, actually we may be finding a deeper sense of belonging, a sense of belonging within our own soul. I want to share some words from Thomas More. He was the one speaking with Oprah at the video in the beginning of this message. He was a monk, and then he became a psychotherapist and an author, and he wrote this book called A Religion of One's Own. He has this great passage where he talks about what he means by that title. He says this: when I speak of a religion of one's own, I'm not talking about a selfish, ego-centered, loosely patched together spiritual concoction. I'm recommending a courageous, deep-seated, fate-driven, informed, and intelligent life that has sublime and transcendent dimension. It can be shared in a community. It can be accomplished inside or outside a traditional religious organization. It is suitable for pious members of a religious group and for agnostics and atheists. To be religious, even in a personal way, you have to wake up and find your own portals to wonder and transcendence. Friends, what are your portals to wonder and transcendence? I find that this is really encouraging for me because I sense in this passage that, we don't need to give up belonging in this journey, right? Because we realize how essential belonging is, how essential community is. But maybe there is a new kind of belonging available to us, a kind of belonging that can hold our uniquenesses, our unique portals to transcendence and wonder, right? Because the highest values of this kind of belonging are not uniformity and sameness, but love, but awe. This is why our community has this highest value of love. We say in our motto, love, period. It's our way of saying our highest value is love, and therefore the unique ways that you show up in your path towards love are all celebrated. How is it, though, that in this journey that we are going to discern and navigate our way toward our own spiritual path or a religion of one's own? Because if you're like me, you're looking out at the world today and you're realizing that now more than ever, we are inundated with all of these voices vying for our attention, right? Everyone's saying they have the next key to fulfillment and peace and wholeness, right? And so there's more information to sift through than ever. And yet, in this move from dogma to dharma, we're moving away from an institution or an external authority deciding for us, doing that navigating for us, right? We know that we on some level need to return that authority back to ourselves. But if it's our internal compass that we are going to be following, then maybe you've asked this question that I've asked, which is, how do I calibrate that compass? How do I know if I'm actually going north? It's a valid question with all that's happening in our world today. And so I'm reminded that Jesus' followers asked a very similar question because they were worried about the same thing. In their time, their specific concern, how they labeled it, was false prophets. They said, what would it be like if someone seemed to be coming representing the light, but they were actually representing something darker? How many of us recognize that we probably have some false prophets in our world today that we see out there, right? Yeah. And so what did Jesus say when his disciples asked him, how do we navigate? How do we find our way through? What did they say? What did he say, rather? Well, he said, when they asked him about false prophets, he said this. He said, as long as someone is holding a Bible and is wearing a cross necklace, they can be trusted, right? Without a doubt. All that matters is the t-shirt that they're wearing. No, he didn't say that. He said the opposite, in fact. He said something a lot more poetic, something that requires a lot more contemplation and requires us to really apply it to our own lives, as he did with many things. And he said this: people and their lives are like trees. Good trees bear beautiful, tasty fruit, but bad trees bear ugly, bitter fruit. A good tree cannot bear ugly, bitter fruit, nor can a bad tree bear fruit that is beautiful and tasty. Friends, how many of us have been told that something was bad or should be avoided, but then we found that it bore some really beautiful fruit and it raised some questions for us? How many of us were told that something was a good tree and should be trusted and it bore some bad fruit? And again, it raised some interesting questions. I think for a lot of us, at least for me, the beginnings of a new kind of spiritual exploration began when our binaries no longer fit, right? The things we were told to avoid actually seem really life-giving and loving, and some of the things and people that we were told to trust, not so much. So I want to expand this out, not just people and their lives, but I want to even expand this out to teachings and practices, right? Like, could we look at anything that we think of as a part of our spiritual path, and instead of just simply judging it on where it comes from, who it claims to represent, can we more so ask, what does this thing produce in our lives? What flows from this teaching or this practice or this teacher? Is it life-giving? Is it loving? Guru Nanak was a Sikh mystic from the 15th century who said, truth is high, but higher still is truthful living, right? That the most important thing is what a life produces, not what one claims from their teachings. Friends, I have met some people who claim to be very, very spiritual people, but they were kind of assholes, right? You've met these people? I've also met people who did not claim to have any kind of spirituality. They would maybe even consider themselves non-spiritual, and they were incredibly loving and compassionate and open-hearted people. You can take the teachings of people like Jesus or Buddha and twist them and manipulate them for your own gain and for division, or you can take those teachings and allow them to increase your heart in compassion and in love. Friends, the thing to look for is the fruit. What does this produce? And maybe also we can think about our own lives in this way. Can we as human beings lead with our fruit? That much more important about than what we say about what we believe or how we claim or who we claim to be, maybe a lot more important is our lives and what flows from our lives, the fruit of our actions and our being, right? So maybe this is really about living fruit forward, which, you might be out there and you might recognize that's a bit of a wine term. I don't know if we have any wine people, pretentious wine people in our midst, or any pretentious wine people. By the way, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. If you're pretentious about anything, we love you, we appreciate you. It's fun to be pretentious, so go for it. We're not dissing you. But what I will say is that if you have this person in your life or you know this person, you've seen a little bit of this, right? Good notes, okay. Okay, I'm sensing a little bit of cranberry and charcoal and wet leather. But what do they say? They say, it's fruit forward, right? And what they mean is that it's leading with the fruit. You can taste the fruit. I'm probably even getting that wrong. The wine people are like, that's not what you mean by fruit forward. It's actually the tannins are fruity. And blah, blah. Anyway, I encourage you, though, to live your life fruit forward, meaning, right, to lead with the product of what your life actually brings forth from you. What is your life producing? What kind of virtue and value? And the same thing to look and see in others. What kind of virtue and value does this life produce? Not just simply who do they claim to be representing. So friends, I just ask you this. How do you define good fruit? What is good fruit in your heart? I know for me, when I think about good fruit, I think about awe. Does something or someone and their teachings, or does a practice or an idea, does it lead me to awe? Does it lead me to self-transcendence, right? Like caring about more than just myself, but seeing myself as being interconnected? Does it lead me toward greater compassion? Does it lead me toward more gratitude, more love? And we can trust that. But by that same token, what do you consider to be bad fruit? For me, I think of things like fear, right? If there's a teaching or a practice that just leads to more fear, I consider that to be bad fruit. It leads to maybe people being excluded, right? If you see like really exclusionary virtue, or that's the idea that really is rooted in something, then I can sense that maybe that's bad fruit. Is there a deep resistance and a deep division and putting our walls up from others, right? This I would consider to be more bad fruit. And the ironic thing, the upside down thing about the world we live in today is that there are many people out there who are pointing their finger at others saying like, that's evil, that's bad, be afraid of them. And the irony is that they, in doing that, are operating out of fear, are spreading fear, and they're becoming the very thing that they're pointing their finger at. And so it can be so upside down. This is why we need to trust the fruit. Because the fruit that something bears will tell you the kind of tree it is. So friends, I give you permission to make that decision for yourself. But you never needed my permission anyway, right? That's the journey, is realizing you didn't need someone else's permission. You could trust your own compass. That the journey from dogma to dharma is a perennial journey of empowering ourselves back into our own knowing, so that no more do we need to trade belief for belonging or trade authenticity for security and safety. That, in fact, I think that we can actually have our cake and eat it too, because we can have a deeply authentic life following our own individual spiritual path and do it in community with a deep sense of belonging. That's my hope for this community. That's my hope for the journey that we're on. And as we reflect on that today, I just want to invite you, if you feel comfortable, just to take a moment, take a few deep breaths, and close our eyes if you feel comfortable. And I just want to invite us to feel into our own capacity for discernment, our own innate wisdom and intelligence in our body, in our heart, in our soul. This wisdom that has allowed us to sort between the dogma and the dharma. And in locating this aspect of our being, maybe we recall moments in our lives where our intuition said, no, I do not resonate with this. This is not the kind of fruit that I want to taste of. That you encountered something and you said, no, this isn't love. And in that moment, you had the courage to walk your own path, even if it meant walking alone for a season. And then we take a moment and we find gratitude for that part of ourselves and the courage it had and the wisdom it had. We recall maybe another moment when our intuition said, yes, I do resonate with this. I do feel aligned with this. I do sense the good fruit here, even if it was something that someone had once told you to be afraid of or they warned you against, and you had the courage to trust the nudgings of your own heart and have some gratitude for yourself in those moments. And when we say that we are trusting ourselves, maybe take a second and find that capital S self, that deep part of your essence that you can trust, that is worthy of your trust, that is full of love, that holds so much innate wisdom. Thank you. Thank you. And to however you would name the divine, the universe, God, Creator, taking a moment, thank you. Thank you for guiding me. Thank you for giving me this innate sense that I could follow in my way back to the light and the love. For the people and the teachings and the practices that guided you along the way, thank you. Thank you. For the people and the teachings and the practices that you needed to leave behind, for they no longer served you, we again say thank you. Thank you for showing me that I have the courage and I have the power to make that choice for myself, to follow my own path, to live out this journey in a way that is uniquely my own. And with a few more breaths, we bring this back and we recognize that we're going to be able to take this into our lives. It's not always going to be easy, but we're not alone. And we know where to look. And we know who to trust. So, when you feel ready, we can open our eyes.